You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. So I like to point out each and every day, expands our base. You may not remember that in 1940, when Franklin Roosevelt was running for president, he coined a phrase, Martin, Barton, and Fish. Well, the whole point was to prove who his enemies were and to make fun of them. We now have a situation where we have Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan. That's right, allies of the United States of America who are being attacked by Iran. Wait a minute, how can Iran attack them? Iran doesn't have the capability, right? Wrong. The President of the United States said he had wiped out their capability for offensive action. Not true. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we find ourselves in a position where the U.S. and Iran are exchanging attacks across the Middle East. Now, there may be moments when rockets don't fly, but the simple truth is there was no ceasefire. And I want to point this out emphatically. And if you talk to the people in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan, they will tell you the same thing. There is no doubt in my mind that this war is going to continue. And it's not just the firing of missiles. No. It's what happens when Iran's agents continue to subvert Middle East peace. There is no doubt that there is no peace in the Middle East. There is also no doubt that Donald Trump's efforts to engage in some sort of peace talks have failed. They have failed miserably. And I wanted to make clear this morning that we are going to be watching carefully what happens. No doubt about it. Now, let me turn to another aspect of the Middle East, and that is what's happening in Lebanon. The war in Lebanon is not against Lebanon, it is against Hezbollah. And Hezbollah continues to be a thorn in the side of Donald Trump. And yet, what does he suggest? The Syrians go into Lebanon and solve the problem. As I pointed out yesterday, I will never forget being in Lebanon many years ago and seeing a map which did not have Lebanon on it. The reason was because Syria considered Lebanon to be a part of Syria. And of course, it was historically. And so the real question now is, what does the future hold? The Israelis have made clear they are going to act in their own self-interest, which is precisely what nations should do. But make no mistake, this is just the beginning of a broader problem, and that has to do with the failure of Donald Trump's Middle East policy. Somebody asked me what I think about Benjamin Netanyahu, and my answer is prime ministers come and go, but American support for Israel is steady and secure. And that, to me, is what is really, really important. I was asked also about the question of the Democratic Socialists of America, the left of center group, which seems to be winning Democratic primaries. So they are. But there is a point when we have to realize that the Democratic Party's strength can only come from its center, not from its extremes. And if the extremes of the Democratic Party prevail, it will not be good for America. I've spoken before about the importance of a vital, vibrant two-party system. I speak about that again because I believe that if we don't have a vital, vibrant two-party system, the American system itself is in jeopardy. Third parties don't work in America. As I pointed out recently, the last third party to succeed was the Republican Party in 1860, when it elected Abraham Lincoln president of the United States. Third parties don't have the wherewithal to win. I want to say a word about Donald Trump and a decision he made based on the Supreme Court saying that he can fire people if he chooses to, except those who serve on the Federal Reserve. I want to talk particularly about the Election Commission and the fact that all of those members have been removed by Donald Trump. There is, again, no question but that what happens in the elections in November will be critical. And what Donald Trump is talking about, what he is suggesting, is that he might try to take over the elections. Let's be clear about this. Democrats and Republicans alike must resist any effort by Donald Trump to take any such action. That kind of an action would completely change the nature of American politics. There is no doubt that we have a serious problem when it comes to the Democratic Socialists of America. The Democratic Party's strength is when it runs from the center. When it goes to the extremes, it fails, and that applies to the Republicans as well. One of the real challenges I want to suggest that we will face in the days and years ahead will be the rebuilding of the Democratic and Republican parties. They must function as legitimate parties, or else the American political system is in danger of, well, real problems. I want to speak for a minute, if I can, about the heat dome that is descending on America. But it's not just America, it's the world. The fires in Spain, the tremendous heat in Europe, what is happening here in the United States, particularly with the heat dome that is now descending on the eastern part of our country. Do we understand the danger of global warming? And the simple truth is, the seas are rising. And as they rise, we face a problem. Because with an increasing El Nino around the world, the question of global warming becomes more prominent. What should concern us all is the fact that Donald Trump and his administration seem not to understand the dangers that exist in our world. And I point this out respectfully, but clearly and precisely. There are many issues which America is going to confront. None is more important than our future. Our future as a nation, with a political system that works, and of course, that is in jeopardy today. Now, let's say a word about what is happening in Maine. All of you know that I have been very reluctant to even talk about the problems of Graham Plattner, who is now announcing he'll drop out of the state's U.S. Senate race after a former girlfriend accused him of rape. That's what it was. Now, you have to understand that Plattner denies the allegation, faced considerable pressure from his own party to quit the race, and finally did. That is to say, he's filing papers to withdraw. That means now that the Democrats in Maine face a real challenge, and they've decided to call a convention, a statewide convention, with the opportunity for Maine Democrats, through a convention, to choose a new nominee for the United States Senate. Let's be clear. There is an opportunity in an unprecedented moment for the Democrats of Maine to seize the opportunity to choose a candidate who will be able to defeat Susan Collins. Maine's Democratic Party's executive director, Devon Murphy Anderson, has previously released statements accusing Plattner's campaign of repeatedly trying to, and let me quote directly, to put their thumb on the scale, end of quote, in determining the next Democratic nominee. That's not going to happen. Democrats in Maine understand that there has to be a complete separation. Plattner's campaign sent a survey with a question of who would be the most acceptable nominee. And I have to tell you, it's not going to matter because Plattner is now history. But it also goes to the heart of who we are in terms of really vetting our candidates. Okay, some candidates survive. Let me give you the example of Bill Clinton, who went on 60 Minutes with Hillary seated by his side. And of course, we all thought of the song, "Stand By Your Man." And that is what Hillary Clinton did until, and by the way, she continued to stand by him, even through the Lewinsky matter. We have seen other candidates who have had scandals here in California. Eric Swalwell, who clearly would have been the Democratic nominee for governor and therefore probably the next governor of California, who because of charges of sexual harassment had to drop out. I want everyone to understand very clearly that the political party in Maine, which will now make its determination on a candidate, is very important because control of the United States Senate may hang in the balance. And let me point out clearly, precisely, unambiguously, that is going to be critical in terms of future nominees, not only for the Supreme Court, but for judicial nominations. I want to speak for a moment about another foreign policy matter, and that has to do with Ukraine. You know that the Ukrainians are now battering Russian oil facilities with drones, and those oil tankers have been set ablaze. We have to point out that in Ukraine, there is a major battle going on, and it is a battle between Russia and Ukraine that has now assumed dimensions in a different kind of war. Drones. Drones are being used effectively by both sides. Who can win? Who can lose? I can't tell you. But I do know that it means that we have now proven through these actions by Russia and Ukraine that drones are an effective method of warfare. We are going to encounter more and more drones being used, no doubt in Europe, but also in terms of the Middle East. And there should be no doubt about it that this raises many questions. So I wanted to pose now to you the question of what we do if the United States is subject to drone attacks. Are we going to be ready? And the answer is, of course not, because there's no way to really control drones, right? And if a drone, heaven forbid, should have a more powerful explosive, perhaps even a nuclear device attached to it, what does that augur for the future of warfare? These are not easy questions, but I do want to remind you that when in World War II, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed, it was conventional delivery. Conventional delivery. Well, now, my friends, unconventional delivery is common. There is no doubt that a Ukrainian drone strike has sparked a fire in an oil depot in the western Russian city of Tevet. And according to what we know, this is just the beginning of what we are going to be seeing in the future. So the Russian Defense Ministry said its defenses downed 75 Ukrainian drones from late Wednesday into early Thursday. Ukraine's Air Force said Russia fired 94 long-range strike drones and 2 ballistic missiles. We should know that while 70 drones were jammed or intercepted, 19 drones and both missiles damaged 13 locations in Ukraine. It is a different world in which we live. There is no doubt about it. From domestic politics, of course, to what we face in the world. There is no doubt that the world is more dangerous today than at any time in recent history. And so I wanted to reflect on all of this with you because I think it is important to understand. All right, now it's time to shift. I want to shift to your question and answers. And I want to thank Gogo Zoger and her team who've submitted these questions. So let me begin with Annette's question about the Democratic Socialists of America. Are they a danger? They are. Not because socialism is a danger, but because it gives Donald Trump an opportunity to blast socialists as if they are communists. Make no mistake, the Democratic Socialists of America do take extreme stands, particularly their anti-Israel positions, which are growing and which seem to have adherents from people who should know better. Let's be clear. When you are dealing with Jew hatred by the Democratic Socialists of America, it's a far cry from what the Democratic Socialists of America were under Michael Harrington. Many of you will remember Harrington from the 60s, who was the leader of the Democratic Socialists of America, and he, my friends, was a Zionist, pro-Israel, believed strongly in the right of Israel to live and grow. There is another question that grows out what the Democratic Socialists of America are doing. I have not spoken particularly about the World Cup, but I am noticing now that when Morocco lost to The Hague, there were chants from the Moroccans about how all Jews are gay. There was a sense, again, of anti-Israel rhetoric, of Palestinian flags being waved, and a whole new approach, which I must tell you disturbs me profoundly. I am a Zionist. I believe in Israel's right to exist, and I believe that the comments being made now lead to the discrediting of the right of Jews to have a state. After all, what does Zionism grant to Jews? In the words of Justice Louis Brandeis of the United States Supreme Court, Zionism grants to the Jew the same right as every other people in the world, the right to have a nation of their own. That, to me, is critical. You can be critical of Benjamin Netanyahu or any particular government of Israel, but the simple truth is the denial of Israel's right to exist is a serious problem. I want to describe another very serious problem that I alluded to earlier in the context of my remarks, and that has to do with climate change. Remember that Donald Trump removed us from the Paris Accords during his first term as president. Joe Biden put us back in the climate accords, and then when Donald Trump was reelected, he removed us again from those Paris agreements. Are we facing an international, a worldwide crisis? The answer is yes, and it is something we had better understand and understand clearly. Unless something is done to curtail the continuing global warming, we as a civilization, as a world, are going to be in deep trouble. I want to emphasize this and explain it because I believe it to be so critical to our future. I also want to talk for a few minutes about what we mentioned a little earlier, the question of the threat to American elections. There is no doubt that Donald Trump is threatening major action between now and November, which could disrupt the American political process. I spoke recently about Wendell Willkie, the Republican candidate for president in 1940, who, when he lost, delivered a great speech, the Loyal Opposition speech. I urge you to Google it. There must be a loyal opposition, my friends, no doubt about it. This question comes from Maggie. She wants to know, what are the implications around the health of Mitch McConnell? The answer today is profound. McConnell, the longest-serving Republican leader, in the history of the United States Senate, now seems incapacitated. And the Republicans drawing around him are saying he's fine, he'll be back. Why? Because if something happens to Mitch McConnell, the representative situation when it comes to Kentucky, the state that he represents, is this. The Republican legislature removed the power of the Democratic governor, Andy Beshear, to put a replacement in the United States Senate. That means there will have to be an election. The Republicans are hanging by a thread in the Senate, and if the Democrats were to take control of the United States Senate, it would change the balance of power in Washington. Just as surely, the Republicans are concerned about losing the House of Representatives in November. But remember the critical nature of the Senate. All judicial nominees go through the United States Senate. So, Maggie, we should be concerned deeply about what is happening now with Mitch McConnell and his health. Why won't there be a clear statement about his health? And the answer is because as long as the Republicans can hold on to that seat by hook or by crook, the Democrats cannot control the United States Senate. I want to speak now, if I can, in response to a question by Marco. Marco wants to know very simply, will the American political process survive Donald Trump? And of course, we just spoke about his firing the Election Commission. Remember that all states are in charge of their own elections. Elections are not national. And there is some fear that Donald Trump could declare a national emergency or have Republican governors in their respective states declare a national emergency, which would subvert the validity of the national elections. I want to recall historically that during World War II, there was a suggestion, 1942, that the elections be suspended here in the United States in light of the war. The united response from Sam Rayburn, the Democratic leader in the House, who was Speaker, and Joe Martin, the Republican leader in the House, who was to become Speaker on 2 occasions, was clear. We would not allow foreign interference to disrupt the process of American elections, which I would remind you take place state by state. This is something which we must understand and we cannot retreat from. Elections must be free and fair in the United States of America. From sea to shining sea, from Maine to California, there can be no disruption by the President of the United States of this process. And now, if I can, a word about the Supreme Court. This question comes from Guy. He asks, is there anything we can do about what the Supreme Court is doing? And the answer is no. There will be no expansion of the Supreme Court, new members. There is no way to change rulings that come from the court, at least in the short term. We know that there have been occasions when Supreme Court decisions have been overturned. Plessy versus Ferguson was overturned by Brown versus the Board of Education. And we know that Citizens United, which opened the way to money, saying essentially that corporations have as much right as people, that also is going to be subject in a different time by a different Supreme Court to being revoked. Overturning Supreme Court decisions, well, it's unusual, but not unprecedented. Remember, Roe v. Wade, the right of a woman to choose, was overthrown by this Supreme Court, returning powers to the states. And I want to speak for a moment. Angela asks me, do states have power to determine their own destiny? And the answer, Angela, is yes, they do. And that can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. When it comes to elections, I believe it to be a good thing because the Constitution is clear about states controlling elections. When it came to the right of a woman to choose, that's a different matter. That's something we should all be concerned about. Why? Because it is clear to me that when Donald Trump and the so-called conservatives on the court interrupted the right of a woman to choose, it changed dramatically freedom in America. What is completely unusual is that the Republican Party in the past was a defender of women's rights, defended a woman's right to choose, became a champion of the Equal Rights Amendment. The Republican Party today has been captured. It's been captured by people on the right who have no respect for or devotion to the Constitution as it was written. And by the way, I think when push comes to shove, their lack of respect for the Supreme Court would also be clear. Another question comes in from Jack, who wants to know, is there anything we can do to restrain an American president when it comes to foreign policy? The answer, Jack, is no. In foreign policy, a president is king. The only restraint, and I've talked about this before, that has ever been imposed was when Gerald Ford had money for Vietnam cut off and made the decision, based on his respect for Congress, that he could not intervene directly. This, to me, is an important decision by Congress. And in the event that Congress can develop a backbone, it will make a huge difference. But a subservient Congress, like a subservient Supreme Court, is a danger in the American system. The whole idea of our system is co-equal branches of government. We must restore the strength of Congress and the courts, and we must challenge the idea of a unitary executive. That, to me, is very, very important. Rob asks, why are you so opposed to a unitary executive? And Rob, my answer is a clear one. The unitary executive creates the environment for a potential dictatorship, and that should scare everyone. Co-equal branches of government exercising their power effectively should be a responsible way to conduct our policies. I believe that with all my heart, and I believe that if you subtract the Trump factor, you'd believe that too. There is one last question that I believe I should answer, and that has to do with my vacation plans. I will be gone from July 14th until August 1st. I'm taking a little time off. My wife and I are going to take a vacation together, and we are looking forward to it. I will announce this again on Monday. Monday will be my final podcast because I want you all to be aware that I leave with some reluctance, but I know that Around the Political World with John Rothman will continue to grow and prosper when I return. So I ask your indulgence and your pardon. So from July 14th until August 1st, I will be, away. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links in the show notes to connect with me on social media. Remember, please, to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. I will be back on Monday, and we will have a chance to analyze what happens over the weekend. Of course, you know the show has been getting so much positive attention that we're excited to bring on advertising support This helps us create more opportunities for Around the Political World with John Rothman, and that is a good thing. So that's it for today. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll be watching avidly to see where the news takes us, from the Middle East to Ukraine to our own glorious United States of America. That's it for today. I am John Rothman. See you on Monday.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.